September 2021. A climate activist in France uses a Proton Mail account to organize local protests. French authorities pursue the activist through legal channels. Through a mutual legal assistance treaty, they reach Swiss authorities, who serve Proton with a legally binding order. Proton complies. The company provides the IP address from which the account was being accessed. The activist is identified. The story breaks in international press, and for a period, a significant portion of the privacy community reacts with shock. The headline in many places reads, "Proton Mail handed over user data to police." The implication, for users who had chosen Proton specifically because they believed it would protect them from exactly this outcome, is that their trust had been misplaced. The reality is more complicated than the headline, and the lessons from the incident are more valuable than the reaction to it. Understanding what happened, what Proton could and could not do, and what the boundaries of end-to-end encryption actually are, is a better education in operational security than any marketing copy from any privacy company. Let me walk through the facts, because they matter. Proton Mail is a Swiss-based email service that pioneered mainstream end-to-end encrypted email. Messages between Proton users are encrypted client-side with keys the provider does not have. This means the content of those messages cannot be produced in response to any legal order, regardless of jurisdiction or authority. That is architecturally true and has been verified through code audits. What Proton does have is metadata, account creation data, IP addresses that connect to the service when logging in or sending mail, timestamps of logins, recipient email addresses for mail leaving the Proton system. These are not encrypted by Proton's end-to-end system because they are necessary for the service to function. If you log in, Proton has to know it is you, which requires processing your credentials. If you send mail to an external address, Proton's servers need to route the mail, which requires handling the destination address. In the 2021 case, French authorities did not request message content. They requested the IP address associated with a specific Proton account. Under Swiss law, Proton was required to comply with the order. Because IP logging was a capability Proton could provide, and the legal framework permitted the request, Proton did not voluntarily surrender data. The company had no legal option to refuse. Swiss law allows service providers to be compelled to log IP addresses on specific accounts targeted by legitimate legal orders, and to provide that log to authorities. Proton's privacy policy at the time stated that the company did not maintain IP logs by default, which was accurate. What the policy did not make sufficiently clear was that Swiss law could compel Proton to begin logging for a specific account going forward, even if no log existed before the order. This is the crucial architectural detail. The company does not need to retroactively produce logs it never kept, but when ordered, it can be required to start capturing logs for a targeted user from that point forward, which is what happened in the French activist case. In response to the public backlash, Proton made several changes. The privacy policy was updated to more clearly state that while the company does not log IPs by default, it can be legally compelled to do so for specific accounts under Swiss law. The company published a transparency report showing the number of legal requests received and the number complied with, which was substantial. In 2020, Proton received and complied with approximately 3,500 data requests under Swiss law. By 2022, the number was over $6,000. In 2023, it exceeded $7,000. The trend is upward. This is not unique to Proton. Every service provider operating within a legal jurisdiction faces compelled data disclosure. Signal, which is based in the United States, receives legal requests as well. Signal's design limits what Signal can provide to approximately 2 pieces of information per account: the date of account creation and the date of last connection. That is a more restrictive architecture than Proton's. When Signal has responded to subpoenas and produced this information, the company has published the requests and responses publicly to demonstrate how little data is actually held. Telegram, depending on which parts of its infrastructure are in which jurisdictions, has had a more inconsistent record, and parts of Telegram are not end-to-end encrypted by default. The key question for a user is not whether a service complies with legal orders. Every legitimate service does. The question is, what the service is architecturally able to provide when compelled. That answer depends on what the service stores, what metadata it retains, what jurisdictional protections exist, and what capabilities the provider can be forced to activate prospectively. Let me break down what Proton can and cannot provide, because this determines what threat model Proton actually addresses. Message content between Proton users. Cannot provide. Encrypted with keys held only by the users. Message content between Proton users and external providers. Depends. If the user enabled PGP for the external recipient, content is encrypted and Proton cannot provide it. If the user sent plaintext mail to a Gmail user, Proton handled that mail in plaintext, and could, if logs of content existed, produce it. Proton does not log message content by default, but the underlying mail traffic does transit Proton systems, and a compelled capture from that point forward is possible. Subject lines of messages. On Proton, subject lines are also encrypted as part of the end-to-end protection for Proton-to-Proton mail. For Proton to external mail, subject lines may be handled in ways that expose them to the server. Recipient addresses. Proton has routing data. This can be produced if compelled. IP addresses connecting to the account. Not retained by default. Can be retained prospectively under compulsion, as in the 2021 case. Account creation data, including the recovery email address you provided. Retained. Can be produced. Payment information. Depends on payment method. Cryptocurrency payments leave different records than credit card payments. Login times, times of activity, and approximate patterns of use. These can be produced from server logs, which the company maintains for operational purposes. Understanding this list changes how you think about Proton as a privacy tool. Proton is highly effective at protecting message content from the service provider itself. Proton is moderately effective at resisting metadata surveillance through policies that limit default retention. Proton is not capable of protecting you from a state actor who has the authority and persistence to serve Swiss legal process for your specific account and compel prospective logging. This is a general principle. Every centralized service provider, regardless of jurisdiction, faces legal process. Swiss jurisdiction is among the more protective in the world for user privacy. It is not absolute. Swiss law permits compelled disclosure of metadata and prospective logging in the context of cooperation with foreign law enforcement under mutual legal assistance frameworks. The Swiss Federal Council has the power, through specific processes, to order service providers to assist in criminal investigations. If your threat model includes state-level adversaries willing to pursue international legal cooperation, a single service provider, even one architected for privacy, is not a complete defense. What mitigates this gap is operational practice combined with architectural protection. Let me describe what actually provides protection at higher threat levels. First, network-level anonymity. If you access your Proton account exclusively through Tor, or through a trustworthy VPN that does not log user connections and is in a jurisdiction that resists legal compulsion, the IP logs that Proton could be ordered to collect would show the Tor exit node or VPN endpoint, not your real IP. Proton actively supports access through Tor with a dedicated onion service. Using Tor to access Proton is a well-established practice for users whose threat model requires stronger anonymity than Proton alone can provide. Second, account creation isolation. An account tied to your real identity through the recovery email, the payment method, the sign-up IP, and the username is fundamentally a different beast from an account created anonymously. If your account was created from a Tor connection with a pseudonymous recovery email and has never been accessed from your real IP, the metadata Proton could produce is limited to that anonymous context. It does not link back to you. Third, compartmentalization. Using the same account for multiple purposes creates linkages. An account used for political activism that is also used to sign up for commercial services, or that communicates with identifiable contacts, leaks identity information through the patterns of use and correspondence. Professional operational security involves one account per purpose, strictly separated. Fourth, understanding that compliance is inevitable. Any provider that tells you they will refuse all legal requests is either lying, operating outside the law in ways that create their own risk, or has not yet been tested. Providers that have been tested and have published their compliance records are more trustworthy than providers with unblemished reputations that have never faced a genuine legal challenge. Proton's transparency reports, for all that they show compliance with thousands of orders, actually represent a more honest presentation than many providers offer. Now let me address what the Proton incidents taught the broader privacy community. The first lesson is that jurisdiction matters, but not in the way many users thought. The belief that choosing a Swiss provider meant choosing a legally untouchable provider was always wrong. Switzerland has strong privacy laws relative to many jurisdictions, but it is not a legal vacuum. International cooperation exists. Companies operating in Switzerland comply with Swiss legal orders. The practical protection Switzerland offers is that certain kinds of orders that might succeed in other jurisdictions, including bulk surveillance orders, without individualized suspicion, are less available. Targeted orders backed by criminal process are available. The second lesson is that the distinction between content and metadata is the central architectural question for any private communication tool. Content can be protected by end-to-end encryption. Metadata can only be protected by architectural choices that minimize its collection in the first place. Providers that choose to collect minimal metadata, that publish their technical architecture, and that deliberately design their systems to hold little information are structurally more privacy-preserving than providers that collect extensive metadata behind a promise not to look at it. The third lesson is that the individual user bears responsibility for understanding their own threat model. If your concerns are routine email privacy, protection from corporate data mining, and general peace of mind about email security, Proton is an excellent choice, and the 2021 incident is a footnote. If your concerns include state-level adversaries who will pursue you through international legal channels, Proton is a useful tool, but not a sufficient one, and layering additional protection, like Tor access and compartmentalized accounts, is necessary. The fourth lesson is that trust is not binary. A provider that complies with legal orders is not a traitor to privacy. A provider that refuses to comply is not automatically a hero. The nuances of how compliance is handled, what is disclosed publicly, what architectural protections are in place, and what the provider does to minimize what they can be forced to produce are what distinguish a responsible privacy-oriented service from a performative one. The Proton Mail incidents, including the 2021 French activist case, and the subsequent disclosures about a Spanish Catalan activist in 2023, where similar IP disclosure occurred, are best understood not as failures of end-to-end encryption, but as demonstrations of its limits. The encryption worked. Content was never disclosed. What was disclosed was metadata the company was legally compelled to produce, and the metadata was sufficient to identify users whose operational security did not account for it. If you take one practical lesson from this, let it be that the tool you use is only as good as the way you use it. End-to-end encryption protects content and nothing else. Metadata is protected only by what the provider chooses not to collect and what the user chooses not to reveal. The framework of thinking about privacy as a feature of a product is incomplete. Privacy is a property of a system, which includes the product, the network you access it through, the identity you use to sign up, the patterns of your usage, and the adversary's capability. Every element matters. The product alone is never enough.